Hi everyone, I wanted to show you the next step in creating this Book of Shadows cover. So I left the first lot to dry and then realised that it wasn't really brown enough, you know, for the wood effect I was going for. It was more grey. So what I did was, first of all, before doing anything else for part 2, I tweaked the colour. So I used some burnt sienna and burnt umber and applied that over the cover, covering all the areas of the cover. This is just to get that base layer of brown back on, to make it look more like wood. And in a bit you'll see I changed the camera angle because it looks a bit weird at this angle. So I just moved the camera just so you can get a better look, and as you can see it's a lot browner than it was. And I just carried on touching it up. Don't worry if you get any paint on the resin areas, it just wipes off with a baby wipe. As long as you wipe it off straight away, it'll come off. If you left it to dry, it would still come off, but it would involve sort of scraping it off and you'd risk damaging the resin. So if you get any paint on the resin pieces, it is best to remove the paint while it's still damp. And I find a baby wipe does the trick. And make sure you do all the areas around the triple moon symbol as well. You want to make sure it's all covered well in that brown. You don't want the paint so thick that it gets rid of all the detail, but you need a decent coat to cover to make sure it's a bit more brown. And then, like I said, just use a baby wipe to wipe off any residue of the resin. And then after that it's a case of using a lighter version of the brown that you've just used. I did this 3 times I believe, and each time I made the shade slightly lighter. So here I'm going over with a slightly lighter version of the colour, and all I've done is I've mixed the brown with a little bit of white just to lighten it, as you can see. And then for the second coat I added even more, because I want all that lovely woody texture that we added using the tissue paper to stand out. Now at this stage you are going to need to dry it off before you do the lightest finishing coat, because otherwise it's all going to just turn to mud. So use a hairdryer or a heat gun like I'm using and just dry off that layer of paint. And because it's dry brushed, it won't take a lot to actually dry it, because obviously the paint's not very wet in the first place. And then take a colour that's even lighter still and just use that to finish off, making the texture in the fake wood show up more. So as you can see, the texture's a lot more obvious now, and you can see a lot more of those textures coming through. And then anywhere where you think you might have added too much of the lightest dry brushing, you can always take a slightly darker shade and go over it just to tone it down a bit. You could even do a very thin black wash over the top if you weren't happy with it still. Then I used the black paint just to go around the top and the bottom, just to add a little bit of variation in the tones, and also it kind of looks like around the edges of the door have got damp. And then just give that a minute or two just to dry off a little bit. When I was doing this, the room was quite warm because obviously it's getting warmer now. And then what you need to do is cut out 2 hinge shapes out of cardboard, and I like to do them slightly wiggly because this is to look more like hand wrought iron hinges. If you Google hand wrought iron hinges for like barn doors and stuff, this is the shape they are. And I like this shape. I like it to look a bit more sort of rustic, as it were. And what I did was cut out the 2 hinge pieces and then 2 little rectangles for them to sit on at the end, which you'll see me put in place shortly. This is to make it look like the hinge is attached to some sort of bracket or bolt that holds it onto the door. Normally I'd do this so that the rectangle pieces go around the edge of the book, but because of the way this book opens, because it lifts up, I've had to just do it this way. And it's just a case of sticking those down with hot glue. Like I said, make sure the top layer of paint's dry, otherwise the hot glue is not going to stick. But because I dry brushed, it was pretty dry anyway. And it dried quite quick in my room. And just glue those into place like so. And it does look rubbish at the minute, but trust me, it'll look better once it's all painted up and everything. And then I wanted like a little keyhole, so it's like a secure door. You know, maybe the secrets behind here, that sort of. That was my sort of idea in it. And then what I did next was I painted the keyhole, which in hindsight was pointless because I had to go over this anyway. But this just gives you an idea of what I was going for. But later on I actually completely covered this and had to do it again anyway. So this was a pointless step really, never mind. And then the next thing to do is to make sure everything's stuck down firmly and then create little dots with the glue. So what you do is you just squeeze out the tiniest little bit of glue, dab it onto the page, and then you swirl the glue gun round and it forms these little beads of glue on the surface. And I use these to create the fake bolts or nails in the wood and in the hinges. I just find this is the easiest way. It was either that or I'd have to find little beads this size and stick them, like little half beads, and stick them on and stuff, and nah, it's easier just to make it out of glue. And obviously 2 for where the keyhole is attached to the door. And then I did some across each of the planks of wood to make it look like it's all nailed together. So as you can see, I'm just doing dots, swirl the glue gun round, and it forms a little dome out of glue. Now you need to give it a minute or two just to make sure that the glue has set. And while it's setting, I've just removed any little wispy bits of glue, because unfortunately when you use hot glue you do get the little wispy bits of glue occasionally that come off, but never mind. It's fairly easy to remove. So I just tidied up my desk while I waited for the glue to set. And then the next stage is to paint everything that I've just added black. And you need the black paint quite thick for this. Oh, first of all, while I'm waiting for the glue to dry, I also added some little dots of green here and there. It hardly picks up on camera, but it's literally just little dots of green here and there, just to make it look like the door's starting to go a little bit mossy. Then take your black paint and paint over all the hinges and the little dots that you've created. You have to make sure the paint's fairly thick so it covers it properly, because you want like a nice opaque layer underneath before you do like the metal effect on top. So here I'm just making sure everything's well covered, and also the thicker the paint the better it is for covering the hot glue. If it's like a watery paint, it'll just slide off the hot glue dots. So just go around and make sure it's all covered. So I did both hinges, and then obviously did all the little fake nail type things I did. And this is where it was pointless drawing the keyhole, because I've got to do the same for the keyhole, paint it all black. And I realised at this point, I thought, well, that was pointless, but never mind. So make sure you go over everything and double check and make sure you've got no white pieces of paper showing through from those pieces. You'll see there's a little one on the bottom hinge, but I do touch that up shortly. And then very carefully use the hot glue gun just to dry it off. If you go too close with the hot glue gun or hold it on the area too long, it melts the beads of glue. So all you've got to do is just literally just blow it over just a second or two. It's just to start the paint drying off, because you need the paint dry to do the next step. So literally I'm just going backwards and forwards quite quickly, just blowing the air over the paint to dry it off, and I'm making sure I don't go too close. And then just while I wait for everything to finish drying off, I just wipe over the resin pieces again with a baby wipe. Then the next stage is to take some gilding wax and go over it with just my finger. So what I did was, it's gold and silver gilding wax stuff that I've got, and I just use that. I just dab it on with my fingers and over the little bolts and things. And you can just leave it like this if you want, with just the bolts on. But I like to actually add it to the hinges and the keyhole thing as well. I like it because it creates like a sort of brassy effect. But I like how it just takes the tiniest little bit just to make those little bolts and everything show through. And then I wipe it over the hinge areas, because I wanted these to have a sort of metallic, brassy kind of look to them. And for this I do a mixture of gold and silver. So this is the gold paste. You can just about see it at the bottom of the screen there. I will put a link in the I'll put in the description all the materials used. And basically if you Google it you'll find it. You can get it from any art and craft store. I got this stuff from Hobbycraft, but you can get it off Amazon and stuff as well. And I just go over with my little finger to make sure I can get as close to all those little dots of glue as possible, and fill as much of that hinge area as I can. And then I had to redo this dot because it came off, so I just did a new dot and then worked around it until it had set. And once I've added the gold, I then add some silver, and I find it just finishes off the look for me. I just think it looks a bit more metallic doing that. There you go, metallic luster wax, that's what it's called. Then I used a Sharpie just to draw out the shape of the keyhole. Now obviously this is not dark enough to show, but it's just to give me an area to work in. And then I used my little liner brush to paint with black paint to put the keyhole back on. And then I like to use a bit of black to go around the hinges just to make them stand out a bit more, and also it covers up any areas where I've accidentally gone on the wood with the gilding wax stuff. And I think it just makes the hinges stand out that little bit more, as you can see. And I go around anywhere where I've accidentally got the gilding wax stuff on the wood, just to touch it up a bit. And then using a little liner brush, I go back in through the cracks in between the wooden boards with some black to put the depth back in, because obviously the cracks between the boards were the same colour as the surface, so they weren't showing up very well. I just want this to look darker and make that detail show up a bit more. And all I'm using here is some watered down black acrylic, just to go over the top of it. I then also did the black around the triple moon symbol as well. I just felt it looked better with that sort of black, almost sort of burnt edges to the wood around the triple moon symbol. I just think it looks better, so I just added that around as well. It also makes the triple moon symbol stand out a lot more. And then I touched up that little new glue dot that I made. and then I just used a baby wipe to wipe off again any little bits of paint that have got onto the resin pieces. So if you remember in the last video, I'll put a link at the end of this video for the first part. If you remember, I poured resin into those recesses, and that's it. That's how to make a cover for a book of shadows. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you like this idea. Thanks for watching, and blessed be, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.